Hello, everyone. This is the Theodore Schubot Friday live stream. I'm your host, Theodore Schubot, and we are going to kick off the weekend by listening to a complete and total stranger talking for the next, I don't know, 6 hours or so. So, everyone's talking about Iran. Obviously, is America going to strike Iran? And if I had to guess, I would say that America is going to be doing some kind of limited strike. I don't think America is going to do a whole scale invasion like what happened in 2003. But even if that does happen, Israel is screwed. That's what I'm going to say. Let's see here. I have some of the soundtrack music playing from the video game Shadow of War, which was a pretty decent video game. Let's see here. Hello, the Crusader 1099, Prince Zechariah. Hello, Alex Manulov. Hello, Theodore. God bless you, and may you have a great stream. I appreciate that, sir. Thank you so much. It's going to happen. What's going to happen, Mr. Noah? Alexis Corral, happy Friday to you too, sir. Ready for some theologic? Yes, absolutely, like always. And let's see here. I'm just going to change the title and maybe the thumbnail to... Yeah, on my stream, I am live. And let's see here. Love that game. The Nemesis system is awesome. It was a really fun game, and it just didn't get... For some reason, it just didn't get a whole lot of attention. I don't know why. The fight mechanics in that game were actually really good. Thank you. Yeah, the fight mechanics in that game were really good. They had a lot of good choreography that you could do in that game, and I just loved it. I loved the way that you could just chain attacks and kill like 5 or 6 orcs very quickly. It was just a lot of fun. I played that game a lot. Many years ago, I played that game. Good evening. Hello, Deep Valley. So I have the music from the main menu playing, which I really loved, by the way. I loved playing this music, and I loved hearing it when I was looking at the map of the game. A lot of fun. Right now, pretty much, I'm just playing Bannerlord. That's pretty much what I'm playing right now. I love Bannerlord, and I can talk more about that game later. It's just such a great game. Greatest thing to have ever come out of Turkey, I will say, because it is a Turkish video game, so... Greatest Turkish invention ever is the Bannerlord video game. I just can't get enough of that game. I could play that game for hours and never get bored. Great soundtrack, yeah. Absolutely. Let's see here. So, one thing that is really big in the... Really big... Well, actually, I should say it's not big in the news. That's the thing. But a story that is very, very pertinent that took place just recently, and that the mainstream media is not really talking about, is the fact that the United States just recently did a massive troop withdrawal out of Syria. And they reduced the number of troops from, I want to say 2,000 to at around 900 or perhaps 1,000 troops. I've read conflicting reports. I read one that said currently it's at 900 troops, and I read another report that said, well, it's at around 1,000. Regardless, that is a massive, massive troop withdrawal out of Syria. And when I first heard about this, I thought to myself, okay, is the New York Times reporting on it? No. Has the Washington Post reported on this? No. Has Haaretz, a major Israeli newspaper, reported on this? No. I found that Al Jazeera reported on it. There are other outlets that have reported on this story, but very few, as far as mainstream, major media outlets go. And I'm thinking to myself, why is this not being reported on at a wide scale? And I think I know why. I think it's because the fact that, think about this, the fact that the United States government has done a massive troop withdrawal is a sign of something. It's a sign of Israel losing influence. Because Israel begged the Americans not to do a troop withdrawal. Israel went so far as to go to the Russians to tell them, could you guys be our protectors from Turkey? Because right now, the biggest military force in Syria is Turkey. That is the number one military force in Syria right now. In terms of numbers, it's Turkey. And the Turks have been telling the Americans for years, can you guys leave? The Turks have been telling the Americans for years, could you guys please withdraw your troops? We will take care of Syria. Because Turkey has aspirations of empire, as we all know. And this is not something that I've made up. This is something that has been widely reported on for years. Turkey has aspirations of empire. Turkey wants to expand into Syria further. It wants to fully control Syria because it wants to be an empire. It wants to create greater Turkey. It wants to revive the Ottoman Empire. Israel, on the other hand, has its own aspirations of empire. It is a Judeo empire. Greater Israel, greater Judea it wants to establish. And this has been confirmed by Netanyahu. Netanyahu himself said, I want to see greater Israel. I believe in the project of greater Israel. He said this last year. And this has come out of the mouth of Mike Huckabee himself. Mike Huckabee talked with Mr. Tucker Carlson, and what did he tell Mr. Carlson? What did the huckster tell Tucker? He said, Israel could have it all. I don't care. Israel could take over the whole Middle East. I don't give a damn. So there is this evangelical Judeo alliance, and they want to see greater Israel. And this is why we see, for example, IDF soldiers with patches on their uniforms showing a map of greater Israel. It's not just a little strip of land that we identify as Israel today. It's Israel, including Syria, including other Middle Eastern territories, etc. So they want to have greater Israel. And so Israel is terrified of the idea of an American troop withdrawal out of Syria. And they have begged the Americans for years, don't pull out of Syria, don't do this. Because they know the moment America does a full troop withdrawal out of Syria is the moment Turkey will fill in the power vacuum left by the Americans. It has been Donald Trump's mission and objective to have a full troop withdrawal ever since Trump was president during his first term. For example, in the year 2019, Donald Trump was very serious about putting in the effort to withdraw America's soldiers out of Syria. What happened? Remember? General Big Dog Mattis went to Donald Trump and told Trump, don't do this. This is what General Mattis told Donald Trump. He said, don't do this. Because if you leave Syria, if you pull the troops out of Syria, the Russians are only going to get stronger. So what happened? Because remember, this was in 2019. Who was still ruling over Syria? Bashar al-Assad, as we all know. Bashar al-Assad was an ally of who? Of Russia. So as long as Assad and his political power structures were in power in Syria, Russia had a position, a strong position in that country. So the Americans waited. You had the 2022 invasion of Ukraine by Russia, as we all know, in February of 2022. And Russia has ever since been bogged down in Ukraine. A lot of Russians have been killed. A lot of Ukrainians have been killed. Fighting is still ongoing. Casualties are heavy. It's miserable over there in Ukraine. So the Russians are bogged down. What else has happened ever since? Assad got taken out. Now, he didn't get killed, thankfully, but he was pushed out of power. What enabled the toppling of Bashar al-Assad was Russia being bogged down in Ukraine. Russia was bogged down in Ukraine. Russia had to deviate attention from Syria to Ukraine. That weakened Russia's position in Syria, thus weakening Bashar al-Assad's power position. And it enabled the Turks and the Israelis to topple Bashar al-Assad. Assad was forced to flee. Now he's living in Russia. He's playing video games. He's playing, I don't know, Bannerlord, Call of Duty, whatever. That's what he's doing. He's in his pajamas. In the cold weather of Russia, he barely even leaves his apartment. That's Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad has been reduced to just basically the life of a video game streamer. He should start streaming. Perhaps Bashar al-Assad can start a Twitch stream. I would love to watch that. I would watch Bashar al-Assad all the time if he was live playing video games. I would totally watch that. But anyway, so Bashar al-Assad was toppled. So that weakened Russia's position in Syria. So now there was a power vacuum. Who filled in that power vacuum? NATO did, through Turkey, its second largest member. So that empowered Turkey. Russia got heavily weakened in Syria due to its being bogged down in Ukraine and due to its ally being toppled out of that country. What happened in 2025? Iran got bombed. Over 1,000 Iranians were killed. And Hezbollah also got weakened due to Israel killing its leader, Mr. Hassan Nasrallah, and also doing the Beeper attack, which killed a whole bunch of Hezbollah leaders. So with Iran being weakened, with Russia being weakened in Syria, and with Turkey rising in power and ascendancy in that country, it looks like now Donald Trump is in the position to do what he has wanted to do for many years, and that is to have a full troop withdrawal out of Syria. RFK said a number of years ago that Donald Trump told him personally that he wanted to have a full troop withdrawal. RFK said this. He said, Donald Trump told, you know how he talks, Donald Trump told me, we're going to pull out of Syria. I want to pull out of Syria. That's what RFK said. So it looks like Donald Trump has been very serious about this mission, very serious about this objective. So then what happened a couple of days ago? I didn't know about this until, well, a couple of days ago. So really, this happened a few days ago. The United States does this massive troop withdrawal out of major U.S. military bases in Syria. Now, you could say, well, Ted, this is because of Iran. Right, this is because America's got this massive armada in the Strait of Hormuz. It's got this massive armada near Israel. It's got this massive military infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, and they're getting ready to do a strike on Iran. And so they are moving their soldiers out of Syria, and they're moving those soldiers to Iraq. And that's true, right? They are moving those soldiers to Iraq. And so you could argue that this has nothing to do with strengthening Turkey. And this has nothing to do with Donald Trump's goal to have a troop withdrawal out of Syria. And this has everything to do with a potential war with Iran. Well, okay, let's say that you're right. Why would they put soldiers in Iraq then? Why would they move the soldiers from Syria to Iraq? If the goal is to take the soldiers out of harm's way, because Iran can hit Syria quite easily, if the goal is to take the soldiers out of harm's way, then why move them to Iraq? Because Iraq is a lot closer to Iran than Syria is. So why move them to Iraq? Now you could say, well, because Iraq is closer to Iran, and so they have put those American troops in Iraq to basically warn the Iranians, hey, if you strike Iraq or if you do anything in Iraq, our troops are there. Okay, let's say that that's true. Let's say that that is true. That's the reason why. Now, let's say that they move those soldiers to Iraq to deter Iran from doing any sort of funny business in Iraq, from doing any sort of military operations in Iraq. That still leaves a power vacuum. No matter how you look at it, it still leaves a power vacuum, because who's going to replace those soldiers? Who's going to fill in that vacuum? Who's going to fill in the empty space, so to speak, left by the U.S. troops? Because remember, they have left American bases. It's not just troops leaving. It's American bases being emptied. That's what this is. So who has occupied those US bases? It's NATO, right? But not American soldiers. So who's gonna do it then? Turkish troops, Syrian soldiers, backed by Turkey, trained by Turkey. And if you look at the areas of Syria that the US troops have been withdrawn from, they are the Kurdish areas. Now, what happened recently with the Kurds? I talked about this before. What happened with the Kurds? What happened with the Kurds is they got backstabbed and screwed over by the Americans. That is what's happened with the Kurds. For many years, the Americans have allied with the Kurds, praised the Kurds, worked with the Kurds, and they said, oh, look, the Kurds, they are our friends against ISIS. And that was true. The Kurds were fighting ISIS. The Kurds were America's big proxy against ISIS. But now ISIS has been more or less defeated. Well, of what use are the Kurds? Of what use is the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces? Of what use is the YPG? Of what use are these Kurdish fighters? ISIS is more or less defeated, although they are still there, but they are more or less defeated. They're backed by our guys, really. Turkey is there. Turkey can fight ISIS. They got the military wherewithal to fight ISIS. They got the capacity to fight ISIS. They're a serious military force. Obviously, they can fight ISIS. So why do we need to be there? That's the question that Trump is asking. That's the question that all these MAGA people are asking. What's the point of us being there? Turkey is there. Who cares? So even if the reason for withdrawing the troops is to just be a deterrence against Iran, those bases were still emptied out. Who's going to fill in the bases? Now, let's say, there's different scenarios that people are pointing out here, right? Let's say America goes full Professor Jang and does this massive invasion of Iran. Let's say it, right? Because you have people online who are saying, well, Israel controls America so much that obviously it's gonna be Iraq part 2, right? Obviously, this is gonna be 2003 all over again, where it's just like when we were living under the Bush administration. Nothing has changed, and we're gonna do this full-scale invasion of Iran. You're gonna have 100 to 200,000 American troops flooding into Iran. Air Force is gonna go in there, bombing Iran, and Israel's gonna go in there, and it's gonna be the Israel lobby controls everything. Let's say you're right. Let's say, for argument's sake, you're right. We're going to have a massive invasion of Iran. You know what's going to happen, right? Turkey's going to be needed. Who's going to fill in the bases? Who's going to fill in the position of the United States in Syria? It's going to be Turkey. No matter how you look at this situation, Turkey's rising up. No matter how you look at it. Now, let's say that America does this massive, full-scale George Bush-style invasion of Iran. We go shock and awe. We blast the Iranians, right? Let's say it happens. Let's say it. What's going to happen as a result? What's going to happen as a result is a lot of American soldiers are going to end up in body bags. And I'm not saying that gleefully. I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm saying that that will be the reality. Because what? You're going to have soldiers going into where? The mountains of Tora Bora. They're going to go into the mountains of Tora Bora. And they're going to be dealing with Iranian snipers, rockets, missiles, the whole 9 yards. A lot of people are going to be dead. Now, a lot of Iranians will be dead at the same time, but a whole lot of people are going to be dead. And so Americans are going to be saying, well, why are our boys getting killed over there? And you're going to see all these coffins coming back, draped with the American flag, a lot of dead people. And Mr. Hegseth is going to say, well, this is great. They've died for our country. And people are going to say, no, they died for Israel because this is a pointless, clueless war. And then you're going to have Mark Cocaine Rubio popping up on the scene with his cocaine lips, all numbed out, like he just came out of a dental appointment. And he's he's going to be saying, well, American troops, you know how he talks because of the cocaine. If you watch his speech that he did during the Munich Security Conference, I mean, the guy was clearly on cocaine. I don't need hardcore explicit evidence for that. The guy's obviously numb. He was stuttering a lot. He had this lisp because he couldn't feel his lips. The guy couldn't feel his lips. So he's, well, we are tired of dealing with the West's managed decline. We will no longer be doing this anymore. And he's always touching his tongue. He's always touching his bottom lip with his tongue. What's going on there? The guy's on cocaine. I'm going to be calling him Marco Cain Rubio. Marco Rubio. But there's a C and an O at the end of his first name. I'm just going to add C-A-I-N-E at the end of his first name. Marco Cain Rubio. That's what I'm going to call him from now on. Marco Cain Rubio. So Marco Cain Rubio, he's going to be popping up saying, well, we have to do this because because we have to show strength. It's about showing strength for our allies. It's about showing strength for our allies. What is this guy talking about? So that's that scenario, right? But even if that happens, let's say this happens, bunch of Americans dead, all these coffins coming back with the American flags draped on them and all this stuff. Bunch of pissed off parents. Why did my son die? Oh my God, this is terrible. Blah blah blah. Tucker Carlson will be all over it. Why are men in uniform being killed in this senseless war that we all know is just being done for the sake of Israel? I mean, this is crazy. And so Israel will just become extremely unpopular even more. More people will hate Israel. More people will be talking about the Israel lobby. And it'll just get worse for Israel. And it'll be worse for the United States because America will be depleted of very vital military supplies and munitions. America is limited on military supplies. America also has depleted a lot of military supplies in its support for Ukraine. And America also has a intercepting missile that is known as the THAAD missile, T-A-D, I believe. So you have the THAAD missile. And America has a limited number of THAAD missiles. Those THAAD missiles take a very long time to produce. It requires millions of dollars just to produce a THAAD missile. It takes a lot of money to produce a THAAD missile. And in order to resupply America's Navy with these THAAD missiles, America has to go to a different country, to Greece, somewhere like that, to get more of these THAAD missiles, to resupply it. Not more THAADs, but if they run out of THAAD missiles, sorry, that's a different thing. I'm confusing the THAAD with something else. But if they run out of THAADs to protect Israel and to protect their naval ships from Iran's ballistic missiles, it's going to take a long time to replenish those missiles. And so you're looking at really, if America goes into a major conventional war with Iran, you're looking at just another freaking disaster and really the final nail on the coffin for the American empire. Israel will also be getting the brunt of Iran's attacks. So, and then you have Israel's Iron Dome. The Iron Dome for Israel has been proven to be inefficient, inadequate for the protection of Israel. And the Israeli Iron Dome can only last for about a week. And even while it's in operation, it is not adequate enough to fully protect Israel from Iran's ballistic missiles, as we all saw in June of 2025. So Israel is greatly limited. America is greatly limited because we will just deplete our munitions, our supplies, our ammunition, our THAAD missiles, everything to protect our Navy, to protect Israel. So what happens when we get depleted of our vital supplies? What happens when we get depleted from our interceptor missiles? What happens when Israel gets depleted of its Iron Dome munitions? These American ships will be sitting ducks. Israel will be a sitting duck. And you will have massive casualties, a lot of dead people. Iran has the ability to produce virtually endless amounts of ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles. And so Iran could just keep hitting Israel. Yeah, sure, Israel can keep hitting Iran, but Iran has a much more massive population than Israel does. You're talking about 10 million versus 91 million people. Iran's got a lot of manpower. They have a lot of supplies. They got a lot of missiles. They'll just keep hitting Israel. And yeah, sure, Israel has the bomb shelters, but how long can that continue on. Israel lost billions of dollars. I think it was somewhere around 12 billion or 22 billion. It lost billions of dollars. And Israel's GDP is at around, I want to say, 660 billion. So that's a pretty big, massive shaving off of Israel's economy. Israel will not be able to sustain itself in a prolonged war with the Iranians. Same thing with the Americans. And not only will this be damaging and devastating for both Israel and America, economically speaking and munitions-wise, it would be massively devastating for both countries, America and Israel, morale-wise, enthusiasm-wise, because you will see a lot of dead people, a lot of dead Americans, a lot of dead Israelis. And in the midst of all this, who would be rising? Who would be rising? Turkey would. Because Turkey would be taking the place of the United States in Syria. Turkey would be taking the place as America's force of stability in the Middle East. And Turkey would be rising up. Iran would be destabilized to a great extent. And Turkey would then take the opportunity to just deploy troops into northern Iran. As we all know, Turkey shares a pretty massive border with the Iranians, and the ethnic group that dominates northern Iran are Azeri Turks, not Iranians, not Farsi Iranians, not Emperor Darius Achaemenid Iranians. The people who dominate northern Iran are Azeri Turks, who are linguistically pretty much the same as the people who live in Turkey. They speak the same language, different dialect, but they speak the same language. And ethnically speaking, they both see themselves as the same people. So the Turks could just go into northern Iran and say, your government is bogged down in this war. We have to make sure that your region is stable so that your instability doesn't boil over into our country. And so we're just going to park troops into northern Iran. Turkey will be expanding, and Turkey would be advancing its agenda of Greater Turkey. Meanwhile, Israelis will be killed, Americans will be killed, Israel would continue to be bombed, and Israel will be economically Israel will be economically being damaged. Israel will be damaged morale-wise, and the same thing goes for the United States. And Turkey would be rising up. And Turkey would rise continuously and further as a threat against the Israelis. Now, let's say that America does controlled strikes, right? This is probably the most likely scenario, although I hope I'm wrong, but let's say America does controlled strikes, right? It does a controlled strike on Iran. So America does a controlled strike on Iran, or let's say Israel does it, or they both do it. Let's just say they both do it. Iran will be also responding. Because as we saw in June of 2025, Iran is not afraid to respond. They will respond, as they did to Israel. When Israel did its Pearl Harbor-style attack on the Iranians responded with vigor. They attacked Israel. They bombed Israel. And it was a 12-day war, as we all know. So let's say they do a controlled strike. Iran's going to be attacking Israel. They're going to be attacking the Israelis. And so Israel would have to go through a repeat of what happened back in June of 2025. You're going to have Israelis being killed, Israelis being forced to live under bomb shelters. The economy will be damaged. Israel will have to spend billions. Now remember, real quick, I'm just going to look this up. How much money spent during 12-day war? Israel spent how much money? 12 billion. Let's just say 12 billion. Okay, you could say, well, that's nothing. Their GDP is 660 billion. That's 12 billion in 12 days. That's $1 billion a day for Israel. Much worse economic repercussions than for the United States. $1 billion a day. And that's on top of getting bombed continuously by Iran's ballistic and hypersonic missile program. So Israel cannot sustain a prolonged war. Like I said, 12 days. Their Iron Dome could not sustain it. Their Iron Dome was not able to fully protect it. protect Israel. They needed America. They needed Jordan. They needed Saudi Arabia. They needed other countries for help. So Israel cannot sustain a prolonged war. America will not be able to sustain a prolonged war. Sure, they can bomb the hell out of Iran. But what happens when you put ground troops? What happens? A lot of casualties, a lot of dead people. If America says, oh, we're just going to bomb them, okay, let's say you bomb them. You have to protect your naval your naval armada. You need your THAADs. What happens when your THAADs get depleted? What happens after you get depleted of ammunition? Your ships are going to be sitting ducks. So America cannot withstand a prolonged war with Iran. Neither can Israel. So let's just say, okay, well, we're going to have a repeat of 2025, right? We're going to have controlled strikes, and Israel's going to get bombed, but they have the bomb shelter, so they can take it. We'll just do that again. Let's say that happens. Let's say that happens. Turkey still becomes more powerful. Because Turkey's going to say, well, America's left these bases. Members of the new Syrian military have filled in the space, have entered these bases. They are our proxy. And as tensions between Israel and Iran grow stronger and the United States and Iran become more intense, America is going to be relying on Turkey more and more. Turkey still rises up. Let's say they do regime change. Let's say the Ayatollah gets overthrown. Okay, the Ayatollah gets overthrown. Who replaces the power vacuum? Who fills in the power vacuum? Well, we're going to have a new leader. We're going to have a new government there. A new government, okay? And that government is going to be aligned with who? It's going to be aligned with NATO. So you're going to have a NATO-aligned Iran. And this NATO-aligned Iran is going to be backed by NATO, obviously, right? I mean, the title is self-explanatory. Backed by NATO, backed by Europe, backed by the United States. So you're going to have basically another Turkey. Because, you see, the Israelis are more threatened. They feel more threatened. They are more intimidated by Turkey than they are Iran. And one of the main reasons for this is because Turkey is aligned with NATO. You see, Israel always wants to paint its enemies as obstinate savages, people that cannot be reasoned with. You can't reason with Hamas. You can't reason with Iran. You can't reason with anyone. And they played this game with Saddam Hussein. They said, you can't reason with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein is just a absolute lunatic Neanderthal who cannot be reasoned with. He is absent of any logic. He is a complete insane person who can press the button at any time. He's a total abstinent barbarian. You can't reason with him. And George W. Bush said, hey, let's have negotiations with Saddam Hussein before we decide to go to war. Israel hated this. Israel absolutely hated this. Why? Because they did not want at all to give off the impression that Saddam Hussein could be reasoned with. Because if people think that the enemy of Israel cannot be reasoned with, then what is the solution? How do you reason with the unreasonable? You can't. It's impossible. So war then becomes the only solution. And that's why the Israelis always want to paint their enemies as totally unreasonable savages. And so they've been doing this with the Iranians. This is why they hated Obama so much. And this is one thing that I liked about Obama, was that Obama said, let's have the Iran deal. Let's reason with the Iranians. The pro-Israel lobby said, no, don't. Anyway, they did the Iran deal, which was a great idea. Let's just negotiate with the Iranians. Let's drop some of the sanctions or most of the sanctions. Let's allow the Iranians to have access to Western markets and to do commerce with European countries. And we will have the IAEA inspect Iran's nuclear facilities to make sure that the Iranians are not enriching uranium to dangerous levels. And that's it. I mean, they had a great deal. The Israelis hated this. They hated this. Why? Because Iran is a country that out-innovate the Israelis. That's the reason why. Iran is a country that can out-innovate the Israelis. There is a Israeli professor. His name is Shaftan. I think. What's his first name? Is it Professor? It's Professor Shaftan. Let me look this up real quick. Daniel Shuftin. He is an Israeli professor. I don't like him. The guy's a hardliner. But Mr. Shuftin said a number of years ago something that was quite pertinent to this whole discourse that we were having. And that is that the only country in the Middle East that can out-innovate the Israelis is Iran. This is what Mr. Shuftin said. He's a major professor in Israel. Very prominent, very popular, very famous in Israel. He said, Iran is the only country that can out-innovate the Israelis. This is what Shuftan said. And so the Israelis, they don't want Iran to thrive. They don't want Iran with its criticism of Israel, with its tensions with Israel, to have any sort of legitimacy, to have any sort of access to Western markets. They don't want that. They want to keep Iran weak. Unless Iran becomes one of their little puppet states, they want to keep Iran weak. They don't want an autonomous, sovereign, independent Iran, because that's a threat to Israel's dominance in the Middle East. And the reason why they don't want Iran to have a nuclear missile is not because the Iranians are these crazy lunatics who will just pull the trigger at any moment. It's because if Iran becomes a nuclear-armed power, Israel could no longer bully the Iranians. The Americans would no longer be able to bully the Iranians. Case in point, North Korea cannot really be bullied by the Americans because they have nuclear weapons. Pakistan, India, these countries cannot really be bullied by the Americans. America tells India, hey, stop buying Russian oil. Stop buying Russian grain. Has India stopped? No, India has actually increased its commerce with the Russians because India cannot be bullied. It's a nuclear-armed country. The Pakistanis and the Indians had a little spat last year. The United States do. The United States immediately got involved, intervened, and negotiated a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Why? Because there are two nuclear countries. That's the reason why. They don't want two nuclear countries being at war. That's dangerous. Because what if one of them hits the button, pulls the trigger, and Pakistan nukes New Delhi, or New Delhi nukes Islamabad? Then you set a very dangerous precedent. Then other countries will think, maybe we can pull the trigger. Let's nuke one of our neighbors. So Iran having a nuclear weapon is an Iran that Israel then has to respect. And Israel doesn't want to respect anyone. If anything, if Israel lacks something, it's something called respect. Israel doesn't have respect. That's why it bombed Qatar. Even though Qatar was commissioned by the United States to be the place where negotiations would be conducted between Hamas and Israel, Israel hit Qatar. Israel doesn't respect its neighbors as long as those neighbors are a serious threat. Israel has nuclear weapons, so Israel has this edge, this militaristic edge over its neighbors. Same thing with the F-35. Israel has the F-35. It has an edge over its neighbors. Even though Israel has a very small population, Israel can still intimidate its neighbors by its military capacity. Its nuclear weapons, its F-35s, its Air Force. Israel has that edge. And Israel wants to maintain a monopoly on that edge. So what happens if Iran gets a nuclear weapon? Israel no longer has that edge. Israel would then be forced to respect Iran. And Israel doesn't want to do that. So Israel wants to always portray Iran as just a savage, obstinate enemy. So then what happens if Iran goes through regime change and they get a new government? Well, Iran would be aligned with NATO. Iran would then have access to Western markets. Iran would have everything that the Ayatollah government wants. And then Iran would just get more powerful. And Iran would become, like I've said already, another Turkey. Because, as I've said, the reason why Turkey intimidates Israel more than Iran is not just because Turkey has the second biggest military in NATO, but it's also because Turkey is respected, and Turkey has legitimacy in the eyes of the Americans, in the eyes of the French, in the eyes of the Germans, in the eyes of the British, in the eyes of the American empire. Turkey has legitimacy. Therefore, Israel has to tread a lot carefully when it comes to dealing with the Turks, because that's America's second biggest member in its empire. If Iran becomes NATO aligned, Iran would then be given legitimacy. And with that legitimacy, in conjunction with access to Western markets, access to Western weaponry, Iran becomes much more powerful. And Iran would still continue to deepen its alliance with the Turks. But in this case, you would have a more modernized Iran. You would have an Iran that is aligned with the West. You would have an Iran that is aligned with NATO. You would have a more technologically advanced Iran. And you would have an Iran that would have legitimacy. And so Turkey would just deepen its access with Iran, and America would say, oh, this is great, because now we can use this Turco-Iranian axis against the Chinese and against the Russians. And Israel would say, well, Iran's becoming too powerful, and America would say, that's great. Now we can use them against the now we can use them against the Chinese and the Russians. And Israel will just get weaker. So no matter what scenario happens, be it a massive conventional war, be it just controlled strikes, be it regime change, no matter what happens, no matter which one of these scenarios occurs, Israel loses. It's a lose-lose for the Israelis. This is why I say the end of Israel is inevitable. Let's see here. I'll read your guys' comments. Hold on a second. Evacuation over potential bombs. Yeah, like I've said, it looks like they're going to do at least a controlled strike. Now, if America pulls out its troops, and the Pentagon has said, we want all of America's troops out of Syria in a month, then you know very well that they are backing the Turks in Syria. And you will know very well that Israel has lost influence, because Israel has begged the Americans not to do a full troop withdrawal, and Israel has begged the Americans not to enable the empowerment of the Turks in Syria. And America is empowering the Turks in Syria, which means that Israel is already losing influence. But if the Americans do a full troop withdrawal, then you will know fully well, you will know explicitly that Israel has lost a ton of influence. Because if Israel had major influence, if Israel had the influence that it wants, I should say, then America would have never done any troop withdrawal out of Syria, and America would have never enabled the empowerment of the Turks. Because what happened? The Americans screwed over their allies, the Kurds. They screwed over their allies. And the Turks told the Americans, get the Kurds out. Stop arming them. Stop backing them. Because the Turks see the YPG and the PKK as threats. And the PKK is a threat to Turkey, because the PKK has been a terrorist organization against the Turkish government. This is a fact. Tens of thousands of people have died because of the war between the Turkish government and Kurdish separatists. Across the border into Syria, you had the YPG. And the YPG and the PKK were allies. And then what happened? With America backing the YPG, the Kurdish separatists in Turkey said, okay, let's do an insurrection. And they tried to do an insurrection, and a lot of people died. So the Kurds want to remove that empowerment of Kurdish separatists. And they want to remove Kurdish separatism as a threat. So then what happened? The Americans took the YPG and then transformed it into the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces. And so the Americans have been using the SDF for years as a proxy against ISIS. The Turks have not liked the SDF at all, because the SDF is just really a remarketed version of the YPG. That's all it is. So then what happened? The Turks said, get rid of the SDF, disarm the SDF, and force them to be integrated into the Syrian military. Because right now, Syria is a new country, and Syria is very weak because Assad has been toppled. It's a brand new government, very weak, very fragile, very volatile. And Syria has already gone through a lot of sectarian violence between Sunnis and Druze, between Sunnis and Alawites, between Sunnis and Christians. And so we have to create this unified Syria. In order to have a unified Syria, we need a unified military. And we can't have a unified Syria if you have these armed Kurdish separatists living in northern Syria, northeast Syria to be more specific. So the Turks told the Americans, force the Kurds to be integrated into the Syrian military so that we can have a fully unified Syria, because a fully unified Syria is a Syria that can be easily controlled by the Turks, because it's very difficult to control a country that is violently divided and that has a state within a state, because the SDF was functioning effectively as a state within a state within northeastern Syria. The Israelis lobbied against this because the Israelis want the Syrians to be fragmented, because a fragmented Syria is a Syria that cannot be a threat to Israel. It's a Syria that Israel could willy-nilly, nonchalantly enter into to do military incursions very easily, and it's to be bullied. And it's also a Syria that cannot be controlled by a rising Turkey. So the Israelis lobbied against this, but their lobbying did not work. And the Americans said, no, the SDF will be integrated into the Syrian armed forces. And that's exactly what's beginning to happen. And so the SDF got weakened. Americans threw the SDF under the bus, and the Turks, through their proxy, the new Syrian military, advanced further within Syria. So Turkey's ascendancy is being empowered by the American empire. Israel is being marginalized and ignored when it comes to empowerment in Syria, and America is enabling further Turkish empowerment in Syria. America is enabling the revived Turkish empire in Syria. And the Turks have told the Americans to withdraw out of Syria, to pull their troops out of Syria. Israel for years has lobbied against it. What happened? America just did a massive troop withdrawal out of Syria. Out of Syria. Another sign, another example of Israel losing influence and Turkey rising in that region. And so Israel's losing influence. Turkey is rising up. And this is something that the Americans want. That's the bottom line. That is the bottom line. I'll read your guys' comments. This music is acting weird. I don't know why the music in the background is... I don't know why this is skipping. Hold on one second, guys. It seems like every time I stream, there's a problem that I have to deal with, and it's so bloody annoying. Let me just take a look real quick at my activity monitor. Energy impact. Real quick. Just... let's see here. Yeah, my CPU for some reason is really high. I don't know exactly why. So strange. Windows.